I don't know how to forward the
I can
stand.
do that.
Chris will
I'll
take
do
care of
that.
that.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Chris.
Yep.
So we can probably get started, and Stan can join up. He's familiar with the system as well. So um, just to give you a quick introduction, I'm Mark Maszewski. I have worked with Chris for quite a long time. I was the Green Bay race director when we had a local in Green Bay. I've rallied throughout Region 5. So Chicago was my closest rally city outside of Green Bay. So I spent quite a bit of time down in the Chicago area. And I have also been involved with National Derby rallies now for ever since I think it was 2017. And I got on the board and have been president now for the last 6, 7 years or so of the National Derby rallies. And if you're not familiar with that, we put on a national championship event every year on Labor Day weekend, and we rotated around at different sites. Chris has been kind enough to work with us over several years now with his timing system and his race management app. So I've been working close with him on improvements to it and things like that to help us run our national event smoothly and add in all the features that we've seen added to the system over the years. So I've been real blessed to be able to work with him, and he always joins me on the net NDR events, which is great to have him along. So that's where my background is. I run the national events, so I'm using this app on a regular basis every year. I also am down in Chicago typically at the races and helping with any issues there with the app. So I've been pretty knowledgeable about it and seen all the different iterations. So feel free as we go along. I'm going to just kind of cover some items here. I got just a small agenda here. I'll briefly talk about the existing training video that's out there. And then I want to go into event creation, driver management, the tab overviews of all the different tabs, chart creation, and race management. So hopefully that will give you a good basis of what the software can do for you and how you can utilize it, the type of devices that work best for each one. I know that was a question that Jim had. So I've got that within my slides. I can share the slide deck with you when we're done. I'll add anything that comes up during the thing. I'll add any additional comments or notes that we discuss, and then I'll forward this on to Chris so he can post it out there for everyone. And then I've got the live system up and available to demonstrate things as well and answer any questions. So let's dig right in. There is a video out there, and I have the link in the slides here. It was put together a while back, and kind of gave some brief overview of the system. Things have changed a little bit over time, but for the most part, the information in there is still pretty relevant. It covers some of the setup preferences for a race, some of the tab contents, and some of the setup of race charts and manual entry and so forth. But we'll cover a lot of that in this, so this may end up being even a better source for you than that training video. Event creation. First of all, you have to have an organization set up, and I believe Chris has got you all set for that. For each org, basically, you end up adding an event. And some of the things you need to consider when you're adding an event is what type of name do you want? Are you planning on running the entire race weekend under one event, or are you going to split it into multiple events? At NDR, we have a tendency to split things up just so that we don't have so much data all on their screen to be scrolling through and refreshing and caching and all that type of stuff. So we end up splitting our different days up for qualifying versus finals and things like that. But it really is a slight preference. In Chicago, we run an entire rally weekend under one event, if I'm remembering correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong, Chris. So there's no issue with the system being able to support that. It's really just your own preferences and how you want to set it up. On the event setup page, the name is the most critical. Creating a name that's meaningful for people to select and know which event to go into. The PA channel, Chris, I don't believe the PA channel is really being used anymore, is it?
It's kind of deprecated right now. You don't
Okay,
need that.
that's what I thought. So you shouldn't have to worry about that. The low car lane 1 setting, I'm not sure what you use in Colorado Springs, but race cities like Chicago have a tendency to want to use where when drivers go up to the ramps, the low car number for that heat always starts in lane 1 for the first phase. They do this as a method so that it's easy to remember. If they're in phase A, all they gotta do is look at their car numbers to figure out who's in which lane. Versus if you're following the chart thing where the top person on the bracket is lane 1 for the first phase, you got to remember who's on top, who's on bottom. And that's where a lot of times race cities used to hand out slips. All the time you get all these little paper slips that you have to fill out and hand out. So if you're used to doing that, that's fine. It'll work. You just want to make sure that this setting is set appropriately for you. If you use the slip method and follow the charts to the T, you uncheck the low car in lane 1. If you want to do low car in lane 1, just have that checked. That really controls where the cars are expected when they come down that first phase. The limit pending 1 race at a time is a setting that restricts the ability to load a pending race for more than 1 pending race for a car number. Typically, you're loading up your double elimination race, for instance, and that car number should only be in 1 race. So it's typically not a problem. If you have multiple events going on, like we have the NDR wrap division or the last bottom division, or we have the legacy division, we may have a driver in multiple races and we may have them staged all at once. So we end up turning that option off so that it allows us to put more than 1 driver, excuse me, more than 1 event for a pending race for that driver. So it is kind of a safety thing. Typically, you shouldn't have that case in your normal race, but usually you can have that box checked on. The driver management features, content of a driver information is being expanded, but the minimum in the existing system, you have a car number and you have a driver name, and you have some features for phonetics. The phonetics, basically, I very seldom ever use that. It basically comes down to if the system is pronouncing a name wrong, then you can use the phonetic options to alter how it's pronouncing it, and the computer you can test it and get it so it's pronouncing it correctly. We do have a couple people in NDR, a couple racers there that, by default, it wasn't pronouncing it right, and we were able to tweak it and get it to pronounce their name correctly, which the drivers really appreciate. They don't like hearing their name pronounced wrong. So some of the things you do need to think about when you're loading drivers is, do you want first name, last name, initial, or do you want the full first name, last name? And there's various opinions on that. The system can handle it either way, but things you need to know about that is that it's easier to recognize a person if you hear the last name. A lot of people recognize those family names, but there's also people that have expressed, well, there's a little bit of security concern because these sites are public. If anyone wants to monitor this race and watch this race, they can see who's racing based on who's showing up in the names. And if you happen to have the last names in there, they say, oh, look at that. This family's not at home right now. They're all out racing. So it's a potential, burglary type issue that you could have. So at NDR, we've purposely just used the initial for the last name. If someone really wants their last name in it, I have no problem adding their last name. It does affect the length of the announcements. So the system by default will announce who's in the starting blocks and by card number and name. So the more content you have in there, that message does take longer to go through. So you got to kind of take that into consideration as well. When the race finishes, it has to go through the whole announcement of who won what rate, which lane won, who it was, and by how much time. And if you're trying to put in the next pair and have it announced, you can be continuously announcing. So take in consideration those type of things when you decide how you're going to put your names in. The system does support manual driver entry, but it also supports download and uploaded drivers. And I really encourage you to take use of that feature. For NDR, for instance, I mean, I've got hundreds of drivers that could be coming in from one year to the next, and I don't want to have to re-enter those. So I love the fact that Chris developed these upload and download features. He used to take my list from a spreadsheet and upload it for me behind the scenes. And now that he's built this feature in and made it available, I basically can go to my last race. I can download a JSON file, save it to my desktop, go into my new race and upload that. And I have my complete set of drivers, exactly how they were the last year. And at that point, I can then add any new drivers. I could get rid of drivers if I don't want them anymore. If they've aged out and they're not coming anymore, I can clear them out of my file. But it definitely saves a lot of time and entry to get those drivers set up in the system. We are looking with the newer version expanding to have a little more information available, like driver sponsors and other information, so that an announcer has more information that they can relay when they're doing the announcing to make the race a little more exciting. So those things are available as well. Couple of tips and tricks. Establish card numbers for reuse. What cities like Chicago, for instance, Chicago will take all their local kids and they will assign them a car number, and every single race they'll have that car number. If their stickers are still in the car, they don't have to worry about changing their stickers out. The numbers are already there for the data entry because they load the drivers from the last race. So they save a block for their local kids.
Your audio went out.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Hey, Mark, I'm hearing a warbling sound. Would everybody else mute their mics except for Mark?
Yeah, I think it's coming from this one right here. 630-841-8832
That
is the
would
one
be
with the
me.
noise.
Yeah, hang on. That would be Stan.
Okay.
Hang on.
I think I can. Oh, there you go. Thank you. Okay. So we typically will go in, we'll add any missing drivers to register at that race. The drivers do need to be added before a chart can be built, or at least the car numbers need to be out there. You can always go in and modify the names later, but the car numbers have to be present in order to put them out there. The retaining past drivers and pre-entering can speed up that process in the morning of an event, let you be able to get your charts made as quick as registration closes. So use the download feature. You can do that at the end of the race. Chris also noted to me, and I added it here, that you can also access your archive races, so you don't have to worry about downloading them right away. You can go back to your last archive race and be able to retrieve that driver list. When setting up a new race, upload that driver set as your starting point. There is a speak button on that driver add feature that allows you to provide a sample of how the system will pronounce a name. And then, like I said, you can use that phonetic name to alter how it's pronounced. Let's take a quick look at the Derby app for the driver area. You can see here, I've got my entire NDR list. All the drivers are included. So it allows me to easily go in here. I can adjust these if someone else has taken over a number. I can filter. So if I wanted to see, do I have so-and-so in here? This is just for car numbers. So basically I can look to see, do I have car 37? Yep. Do I have car 40? Yep. And you see it's all numbers that start with 4 zeros, not just the number itself. And So do I have card number 55 out here? Nope, I don't have 55. So that tells me I can at least assign number 55 if I want. That's another way with NDR. I can, when people ask for a number, I can easily check here. Do I have that card number assigned to anyone or not? So it's a nice feature. The add feature, this one's not showing me the ad right now. Let's go. That because it's an archived race? No, it's not an archived race. For some reason it's not showing me the add button right now.
Did you get logged out?
No, but I'm gonna try to log back in just to see.
So just to keep things interesting, I was messing with login logout code about an hour ago.
Didn't I tell you not to mess with the system today? Let's see here. We'll get logged back in and see if that resolves it. That's a new screen.
We'll call that Thursday's progress.
Hey, if I could just add one comment about what Mark said about when it makes the announcements. For me as a race director, I prefer that announcement is short as far as when they say the driver's names, because a lot of times I'm waiting for the computer announcement to stop so I can make my announcement. So it is better in the long run at that announcement to the app is shorter.
Okay. Right now I am not seeing the add button, Chris, for some reason on this version. So
Let's see if I can get it up. You can keep going.
okay, I'm gonna just try over here real quick. There we go. I went to the other system. I got multiple systems up. So this is the current system that basically just has the car number, driver name, and then the phonetic capabilities. And there's two different phonetic options, the XAMPP and the English. And then so basically if I put in a car number, do speak. I don't know if that comes through the computer or not, but you can basically hear the name. The upload and download features are right here. So the upload basically just allows you to go out there, browse for your system, wherever you've saved a JSON file. And you can either build these JSON files manually, or you can, of course, pull it from the old system. This one won't let me do it because the Frozen Archive race. I'm actually in the Winter Series one. But anyhow, that you can kind of get the idea. The add button's not showing up on this one, but this is the one that does have a couple new fields available on it.
So Mark, is there
yeah.
a spreadsheet interface for the JSON someplace we can use?
I'm not aware of one. What I would, Chris, I know you convert files from CSV to JSON, right? But do you use a converter for that?
I've got it on my radar. I'll probably just have a CSV interface so you can upload and download CSV. But right now that's not a hot priority. I've got a couple other things I need to get done first.
Yeah, so typically in the past, for Chris had uploaded some of those for me, and at least now that I've got the download and the upload, I just keep bringing my names forward. Once I've got him in, I download them and I bring them forward to the next race, and then anything else I just manually type in. So let's see here. Drivers can be added and updated for any type of device. Typically when it comes to the devices steered to me, I like the laptop at the registration desk just because I think it's easier when you're typing in names and things like that to use a regular keyboard of a laptop. They can be entered from a phone, and a lot of it comes down to who that user is that's doing that data entry. Some of the younger generation, they don't use keyboards very often at all, so they're more comfortable typing into it on a phone. Person like me, I'm on my computer every single day throughout my job. It's my job. So I'd prefer to be on a keyboard, typing in names and numbers and things like that with number pads. So it's really personal preference on who it is, what they're used to do that manual entry at registration time. Let's do a quick overview of the tabs then. The first tab is a phases tab. The key thing there is the starting block. This is usually where you're adding the phase to say who is up next. And you enter them in lane 1, lane 2. If you're using 3-digit car numbers, the system works really nice where you type in the 3rd digit and it automatically tabs you to the 2nd lane where you can type in the next 3 digits. You don't have to tab, you don't have to click on another cell. It just moves right ahead for you. In NDR, we have a couple that aren't 3-digit numbers. We have support everything from 1 digit up to 3 digits. So in those cases, you have to tab to the next spot or click on the next cell to type in the next number. But most all American cities, a lot of times they use 3-digit numbers. They use like the 100, 200, 300 series for the different divisions. When you're doing that, it's really easy from a phone to type in at a starting block who's on your ramps. So I typically see a phone used most often at your starting blocks. This page will then, once it's finished, it will all show you all of the completed phases. Even if you remove a phase, you rerun a race, and so you delete it from the race management system, the phase will still show up here. So you might get somebody questions like, why is there 2 rows out here for the same heat? Or 4 rows for the same heat? Well, it's because you had a rerun. It's never going to delete those completely. When you do the delete option, you're removing it from the chart perspective, but you're not removing the data from the system. For transparency's sake, we always keep that stuff out there so that they know we're not fudging things. We can't, we're not just deleting things that we didn't like and redoing them. They're always there. And they should know that there's a reason why we have 4 out there, because they did a rerun. And, the driver pair will know that. So for transparency, we never allow any of the phases to be deleted from the record. Okay. That tab does allow filtering by car number. So you can type a car number, be able to see all the phases for that car number. For each phase, there's a 3-dot menu, which can provide access to the timer feature. The timer feature is basically manual entry. If you need to put a time on something, let's say a pair of racers went down, one had an accident, and they never crossed the finish line. But you basically want to mark that phase complete, let them go on to the next phase. You put an arbitrary number that basically, lets the one driver win, and you can move on. So that the timer can be used for that. It can also be used for moving along if a driver, for some reason, is unable to race, and you want the chart to continue, and you don't want that to eliminate that driver. You want to let them fall over. Maybe they're repairing their car, so they choose to bypass one phase and get moved over to the constellation bracket. You can put in the fake times with the timer so that the chart's going to advance and the driver can continue at his next spot. The history phase basically lets you get at the history of all the phases related to that particular heat. So whatever phase you click on, if there's other phases for that heat, it will show you in the history tab all those phases, especially things like reruns and so forth. The bracket button will actually bring you to the chart that phase is associated with. The delete option is used to delete a phase, but in the phase tab, basically this will only let you delete the starting blocks. So if you have put someone into the starting blocks and you find out that, oh wait, they're not ready to race right now, something, they have a problem with their brake pad or something like that and they have to go off, and you need to remove them to let the next pair go on, the delete tab from the phases will allow you to delete that starting block entry. The video feature basically gives you access to any video that you've captured. This isn't a common thing to have at most race cities, because most race cities don't have the timer system set up with a video capture. In Chicago, a lot of times we'll have the video capture, and NDR events we do. So the video basically takes a clip that includes the time associated with when the first car triggered the timer, and you'd have so many seconds before and so many seconds after, depending on where it took that clip, because basically it's overlapping the clips, and saving them out there, and then it's matching up the one that makes it that's associated with that time period. Lets us see what the finish line is. The important thing that if you are using a video feature, we always stress the video feature is not there to override the rules of the timer system. If the timer said car in lane 1-1, the car in lane 1-1. The video is only there to provide support for how close the race was. When we're taking video, we're using a cell phone. Okay, cell phones are all going to be dependent upon the angle that that camera is, and it's highly unlikely that we have a camera exactly across the line, you know, in an absolutely straight angle. You know, we have to go with where we can hook the camera up properly. So we always try to let people know that the camera is not, we're not a photo finish where the photo is going to overrule the timing system. We trust the timing system is accurate, and the photo is just there so you can see how close it really was. The elapse button that we have, the newer timer systems are starting to test out the ability to elapse time. And if you're using a timer that is capturing elapsed time, that button will then give you access to see the elapsed time and how it works. Depending on how many of those timers you have down your hill, you might have the offsets from each one and then the differential between each lane. So not only does it capture time from the beginning to the end, but it also captures time between the two lanes, which is really slick.
Yeah, Mark. So how do you set that elapsed time up? Because we do have that capability.
You basically are, when you set up your timers, you basically add each timer to the system, and you basically identify the order that they're in. And that timing system basically uses the first timer as its starting point, and the last timer as its finish point. And then it is able to, they all are GPS based. So they all are synced with GPS timers. You know, the GPS clock is synced on them, in order to have accurate times between each of the different timing systems that you bring along your track.
So Mark, the gap there is that Jim built his own timer. The elapsed time feature probably isn't going to work. It's certainly not going to work with Jim's timer and the way he's hooked up. That would be something you'd need my timers for.
Okay.
Okay.
I guess we won't do that.
Yeah. So let me do a quick, go back to the race system here. And if we take a look, here's our phases tab. Let me close the menu here. There we go. So basically, geez, I'm missing the add button for this too, Chris.
Mark, hit browser reload.
Okay. Connection closed. Did I lose my connection? We'll just swap over here. I think I have one set up over here as a backup.
That's a problem I fixed about an hour and a half ago. And so I'm confused about why it's not working on your computer.
Okay. Well, I went to the old system. That's why I had two set up just in case. So on the phases tab, basically you have the button. On a cell phone, you'd have a plus button as well. And this is basically what your starter is using. And you basically just enter in your numbers and type in the 3 numbers, it automatically tabs. Type in your second one, hit add. In this case, it's telling me that there's no pending race found because those 2 driver numbers don't exist as a pending race. So it won't load them into the starting gates. If I take a look at who I have in my charts here right now, I have nobody in my charts in this particular one. So let's go ahead and let's load a chart up first so that we have some data to deal with. So if I
Question
go to
mark,
this
can
chart,
you do a manual pending? That way they can see the manual
Sure.
pending without the
I
chart.
can do a manual pending. So on the pending tab, let's say you have a pair of drivers that just want to go down and race each other for fun. You can go ahead and hit a add here. And I'm just going to use 100 and 101. Hit add. As you can see, those drivers don't exist. There's no names by them. I can use any number. It's not going to require that number to be defined in the driver list. But you won't get any names or anything like that if you don't have the driver defined in the driver list. Okay. So now that I got a pending out there, I can do the add. And let's say I put in 101 and 100 and try to hit add. You see the message that it says cars in wrong lanes in the bottom left there. So it's telling you that you've got them entered in the wrong order. Now, if that's what they're in, the ramp says is 101 in lane 1 and 100 in lane 2. That means they're in the ramps in the wrong direction. They need to swap and get to the right lanes. Otherwise, the timer system won't be able to capture the time and apply it to the correct pair of drivers. Once you put in the correct drivers and they're in the proper lanes, it will allow you to add that phase. The starting block always has the big green border around it. So that is the race that's in the starting blocks. It's ready. Once it's at this point, when you get a green box around it, you are ready to go. You are ready to release those cars, and the timer system will apply the next time it finds to that pair of drivers. The three little boxes here, here's the three little dots on the right-hand side from the menu. This is the one where it gives you the different options. The timer is the one that allows you to enter in a manual time. And it's basically set where whichever lane 1 is the one you want to enter the time into. So it says here lane 1 won by. If they won by 0.005, you just entered 005. It's done in milliseconds. So technically I can also enter 5. And it's going to be 0.005 is what that's going to record. Okay, so it's just total milliseconds. So if it was 0.105, you put 105 in. You don't have to put a decimal point or anything like that. You can see on the phases tab, now we've got this is history. It's showing that the A phase is it was 005. The system uses A and B phase. Yes. And so if I restage this now for the second phase, now have their second phase loaded. And if I go ahead and put a time in for that one, let's say the one in lane 1 won by 90 or 090, whichever way you enter it, still comes out as 090. At this point, I have now the two phases. If I go to the races tab, the races tab will always show you information based on heats. So this is the ad hoc heat that I entered. You can see that it shows the A phase, the B phase, as well as the overall. If I would have gone here to the races tab before they ran the B phase, it would still list this heat, and it would just show that there's only an A phase recorded so far. So it's not until that B phase runs that it will add the B and add the overall. Okay, so typically an announcer, if you have a manual announcer versus using the computer announcer, they would typically use this races tab so that they can see the overall right away when it gets posted. The last race that finishes is always on the top of your screen. So basically when the race finishes, this would refresh. You'd see that they won, the B phase was won by this driver, car 101, and the overall time was also by the driver 101 for an 085 overall. Okay. Back to the phases tab. If I try to go here, We do history. You can see here's the two different phases that were associated with that one. And then if I go back, and oops, I went to races tab. Here we go. If I try delete, proceed with block delete, cannot delete race phase with results. As we mentioned earlier, we do not allow deletion of any phase information. So the only one you can delete from this page is the starting block. So if I put in 100 and 101 again,
You need a pending.
yeah, I was gonna do that. I wanted to bring that up by doing this. If I want to add it again, I can't add it because I don't have a pending. Okay. It will only let you put things into the phases that are defined as a pending race, whether it's part of a charts or part of a fun run. You can only enter things that if it's in the pending first. Okay. So if I go back to pending, as 001, 002, now I can go here. I can add those. And now I've got my starting block again. This one, if I need to get rid of that, I can do the delete here and it's gone. It's no longer in the phases. It's still over here in the pending. Okay, just because you delete it out of the starting block doesn't eliminate that pending race. It's just a method to get rid of it out of the starting block so you can put another pair of drivers in. Okay. Any questions about the phases tab? The video basically is only going to work if you have a video system, and that would basically show you any media files that are associated with it. So typically you're not going to have that unless you've gone to setting up that type of a system on your timer that's supported by Chris's capture process. Okay. The races tab, it lists each heat with the most current phase on top. Can be filtered by, or most current, the last race that ran basically is the one that will be on top. It can be filtered by card number as well. For each heat, the 3-dot menu provides history, bracket, and delete. All similar to the phases tab. The difference here with the delete one is the delete one actually does allow you to delete the phases. But remember, this is not going to remove it from the phases tab. It is going to just back it out of the race chart. So basically it's going to remove those phases, and it always removes the last phase first. So if you only raced one phase and you need to rerun the race, it'll delete the A phase and put you back into a pending state. If you race the A and the B phase, you have to delete the B phase first. And then if you're rerunning the whole heat, you have to then delete the A phase to get rid of the A phase. Okay.
No, not even close.
So in here, for instance, the history on the races will show you this was our pending, this was our A phase, this was our B phase. Okay. If we go back.
While you're on that screen, Mark, let's note the
Yeah.
timestamp.
Oh, sure. 2033-12, 2035-10, and 2036-11. So it keeps track of every single time of when these events took place. And I tell you, I actually, with run the NDR races, I actually have worked with Chris to dump out my data, and I use it for analyzing things. I'm a programmer by default, and analyzing data is something that I enjoy doing and find it very beneficial for planning out my races. It helps me to see that what's my typical race? How much time is it taking me between phases? How much time is it taking me between the A phase and the B phase? Those are all things that I look at after a race is completed and trying to figure out where are my weak points? Where do I need to improve? I find this data and the fact that he's capturing everything by time real helpful for being able to analyze that data and see what exactly happened during a race day. Was there anything else, Chris, you wanted to mention about that, or are we good?
I don't know where you were gonna go. What I was gonna suggest is you delete that race out, delete the B and the A and the pending.
Yep. That's what I was going to do. So if I go to delete option, it's going to give me proceed with B phase delete. It always deletes the most current one first. So B phase is now gone. And you see that now my race history just showing an A phase. If I go to history, okay, the original one was pending, then the A and the B, and now I'm back to just the A. And it captured the time of when I did that. Okay, so at this point, I only have the A phase left. If I need to go back and totally rerun, and at this point, I can actually just run this as a B phase. If that's all I had to do is just correct one phase, I can have rerun the B phase. But no, if I want to rerun that entire heat, let them start over, I go in, I delete the A phase. And now I'm back to no race history showing up here. If I go to pending, I can still see that my pending race is still here for the 100 and 101 pair. Okay. If I go to history, I can see all the history of this one, bringing it back to just a plain pending state. Okay. Now, if I come, on my pending, if I need to get rid of this here, this is where I would delete that pending one. Okay. Because it's no longer on the races tab anymore. It's already gone from there. So if I do need to get rid of a pending, I can go here and delete the pending. Any questions? Okay, let's talk about the pending. The pending tab lists all the phases that have been staged for racing, whether that's part of an actual chart. Like I showed, I just added in an ad hoc one because they want to do a fun run and actually capture times against each other. We can do that. Typically, if we're just sending down a single fun run, just for a run down the hill, you can send them without putting anybody in the starting block. Just leave the starting blocks empty, let them go down. If they go down the hill, we won't capture any time on them. The only time it's going to capture time typically is if you got a pair going down together. So if you're just sending a single car down, typically we just send the single car down. We don't do anything with data entry. We just let them get through their race, let them get through the timer before we add the next starting block. All these tabs, we can filter by the car numbers. I really didn't show that before, but every single one has a little filter icon on the top. So if you open that up and type down here, it will narrow it down to just the phases that have that car number in it. Okay.
So Mark,
yes.
so on the pending thing, if you delete a pending heat, how does that show up in the chart?
Good question. I will show you that. I've got that coming up for you.
Okay.
So we'll go over that. The pending tab has a lot of the same features. The history phase, the bracket, the delete for deleting a pending race, and also a call to race feature. So if we take a look at our pendings, the history, of course, shows the history. The delete would wipe the delete out. Let's go ahead and create this chart here first, though. When you click on a chart, you can see when you first create a chart, it comes in and all these red boxes are entry spots. And I can manually go enter car numbers in here and put in 100, 101, hit update. And once I put that in there, the chart is now going to create a pending row for that. Now, because I had those pendings out there, I don't know if you saw that message on the bottom. Let me hit the update one more time. It says pending already exists for 100 and 101. Because I had manually created that as an ad hoc, and the setting is set that it does not allow more than one pending, it will not let me add 100 and 101 right now. Okay. If I go here, I can delete, and it's going to say, do you want to delete the pending? Yep. Go ahead and get rid of it. Now I can go back to my chart, and you notice that, let me back up here real quick. You'll notice that it's clear. There's no red anymore. Okay. Whenever you see a cell with 2 driver numbers in it and nothing advancing, that means that this cell does not have a pending row for it right now. Okay. This can happen throughout your race for a couple different reasons. You know, if something happened where you went back and you did a correction, one driver had advanced and you didn't clear it out of that spot at that point, you could get to a point where it does not load that pending automatically. Okay. In this case, it wouldn't let me save it as a pending because there was one out there, and I needed to get rid of that because that was an ad hoc. Now, to get that out there, in order for them to show up in a starting block, I got to get that pending back out there. All you have to do is click on this pair of cells, and you can see my driver numbers are right. Hit update, and it has now created that pending entry and it turned it green. Okay, if the heat is green, that means there's a pending entry out there for that particular race, for the A phase of that race. Okay. If I go into the next one, let's go with 102, 3. Automatically turn that green. 104, 105. I'm not used to the auto tabbing. Once it refreshes, it puts the numbers in there. So you notice that when I just typed the 106, it auto tabbed to the next spot for me to put the next number, try to speed up that process. Because it's a 12 card chart, you got to fill in the other ones on this side. Now
So Mark,
at
is
this
this
point-
a manual? Is this a manual way of setting the starting lineup?
Yes, this would be a manual entry for your chart. So let's say
But you can
still
also
want to
do an
use,
automatic randomization. Is that correct?
yes, I will show you that. And I strongly recommend that. I do not recommend this manual process, but if you have a race group that absolutely wants to still use dice or use the drivers draw their location or anything like that, you can still do that, and then you would manually put them into their cells in the proper spots. Okay. Now in this case, I'm on that second round. The top of that chart, let's go back and look at that. The top of the chart, 05A, is going to be the winner of Heat 1. So all I need to do is enter in 05B's driver. So I've got 12 drivers. So that means I need to go in and enter into 05B. I need to enter in 108 as my next driver. Okay. You'll see that they're clear at this point because they don't have any pending race yet, because until they have this driver, they can't load a pending race. Okay. But at least tells me I've got all the spots filled in. I'm just going to quickly. Anyone just catch what I did wrong? On purpose?
It made my skin crawl.
I put 112 into the wrong slot. I put it into A. You see, I still got a red. That's one warning. I still got a slot that didn't get filled in. Now I could go in here and I could fill in 111. Hit update. And it's going to actually pen 111 and 112. That is going to give you a problem. Because when the winner of 106 and 107 come forward, it doesn't have a spot to go into. Okay, so you don't want to put them in the wrong cell. Now, I can fix that. I can just go into here, wipe this back out, hit update. Wait a second, it's still green. Why is it still green?
Gotta delete the pending.
is you have to delete the pending. Just because I changed the chart does not remove pendings. Okay. So if I go into the cell, nice part is, hey, look at that. It shows me here's the pending that I had out there. If I go here, I can delete it. And now the pending is gone. If I go back to here, I expected the green to disappear, but oh, it didn't go.
I don't think the pending delete worked.
It said delete it on the bottom. Let's go here to delete it. The 112 and a 111. Let's see if it deletes from here. There we go. Now if I go back to my charts, so there's a bug in there, Chris, that it's not allowing it to delete from the other page, even though it said it did. But anyhow, now it's back to clear. Now we're good. The chart is good. We're all set to start this race off. Okay. Now, the other way to do this, and the more efficient way to do this, is let's go ahead and go back to charts. I'm going to add a new chart. The chart, when you go to add a new chart, basically it has two different chart types out there, the NDR charts and the ASBD charts. You will typically be using the ASBD charts if you're running all American races. There are differences, so you do want to make sure you grab the correct chart. There are a few charts that NDR has tweaked to make them better from a competitive perspective, so you're not accidentally going against the same person, at least a less likelihood of that. The ASBD has the double elimination and single eliminations out here. You click into there, you say what type of chart do I want to build. I want to build an 8-card chart. The bottom information down here, the day, time, division, these are really, they're there to help you make a unique name if you want to. So if you want to say this is Saturday, it's the morning race or the double race, and it's for the stock field, it will generate a name for you for that chart. Okay. You do not have to use that. You can name this chart whatever you want. So if I just want to name it test 8-car, I can override what it put in there. And this information is, it's not used for anything else. This chart determines the chart, so that you have to pick the right chart. Now on the bottom here, these are just being used to generate a chart name for you. So if you just want your own names, just go down here and type what you want. Hit add. The chart will now get listed here. Okay, if I click into it, it's totally empty. Okay, if I go back to my chart list, there is a little dice icon on the right-hand side here. If I click on that dice icon, what it will do is it'll list all of the drivers, or it'll list all the cells that need to be populated, and it has a select driver option. And of course, I don't have my drivers in this one.
Sorry.
Let me go. It's okay. I can
Hey,
easily
Mark, can
fix
I
that.
interrupt you and say something?
Sure, go ahead. As I
Hey,
load my
Mark, can
drivers.
as far as naming that chart, you really do want to name that, whether it's a double, a single, a morning, or an afternoon race. And the reason that you want to do that is All American Select Derby requires you to send in a chart. Now, with this system, you can actually print this chart. Will be it'll create a PDF of it, and you can actually save that PDF to your computer or your phone or whatever, and then you can email that to Akron. So when you name it, it makes it much easier to know which chart you're sending in. There'll be 3 fields that are not filled out on there, which will be your race city, which will be your division, and also the date. Even though the nice thing about the app is it gives that file a name so you know which race you're running. And that way, which race you want to send into Akron. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense, Dan. Yeah. Luckily, yes, with NDR, I don't have to worry about sending them to anyone else. But yes, it makes great sense. It's a nice feature to be able to print off that chart, complete a race chart and send that in versus having to deal with a paper copy. At most of our race cities that we're running these apps, we don't even run paper copies anymore. Or very
Well,
seldom
yeah,
do
you
we.
don't even need to. You don't even need to print that off and send it to Akron. You'll just save it as a PDF, and then
Yep.
you'll email it to them.
Right. So in this case, we'll go back to the driver selection to populate a chart with the auto feature. You select drivers. It will list all your drivers that you have defined. And all you have to do is go through and check which drivers are planning on racing. As you can see, as I collect them, it identifies how many I've selected. I've selected 5 so far. If I know I've got 7 drivers that are here racing, once I get to my select 7, I've got them all set to go. I can press the select 7 drivers. It'll bring me back to the screen that will show me that it's going to fill the chart with 7 drivers. Here are the 7 driver numbers that I verified. So I can go ahead and check that against my registration to make sure that, yes, those were the 7 drivers. I've got them all. I've got the correct numbers. Once I know I've got the correct numbers, I can hit the fill chart. It does the autofill process, and boom, you now have a chart fully populated with the buys in the correct spots and all set to go racing.
So, Mark, I just want to ask the Colorado Springs team, we did have any trouble using this randomization process? Because usually we have this special thing where we pull numbers out of a hat and that determines their order in the brackets. So Oliver, you have any problems using the randomization process?
No, I would prefer to use the randomization process, so that's fine.
Okay. So how about the rest of you guys, Blake and Bob? Do you have any problem with that?
I don't. I think random is good.
Okay, so we'll use that at our next race.
Yeah. It is definitely a time saver. You save yourself having to put in the things. You save yourself accidentally making the mistake of putting ones in the wrong slots, especially for those odd charts like the 12-car charts. So it's really handy. The only rule that Akron has in their rules is that you have to give the racers the opportunity to witness a chart being built. So there's nothing saying that they have to be involved with pulling a car number or anything like that. So what I usually do at the NDR races, I announce the fact that I'm going to be building the charts at this time. And anyone who wants to watch this can watch it. I go in, I select the drivers, I verify my drivers. And I said, I'm pressing the button now, and they can see my screen and know that I'm not doing any funny business. I'm not predefining it. That's the whole concept is you're trying to make sure that they know that you're not setting up a race chart with certain drivers being favored. And the randomization feature works great for that. I've never had anyone complain about me using it. It's quick, efficient. Your charts are ready to go. They can see it on their devices as soon as you press the button. They can go in and see exactly who they're racing, whether they got a buy or not a buy. It's pretty handy. Okay. So once our chart is ready to go, all these ones with green here basically are now in our pendings. If I go take a look at our pending races, you can see I've got all my pendings here. Okay. One of the things that is important to know, even though this system just loaded up all your pendings, it doesn't necessarily mean that you want all the drivers to just come to the starting blocks. You still, as a race director, still need to manage how you want to release them. In this particular case, the only ones that are paired up for this 8-car race are, of course, the first round. So technically, yes, all those pairs can go to the race. So usually at our drivers meeting, we announce all of our first pairs and get that first round. They all can pair up and come to the ramps at the same time. If you're dealing with a much larger field, you may want to control how you're sending those drivers to the ramps so that you can keep your race charts moving along properly. The real danger in, especially when you start getting further along in the constellation bracket is if you get single threaded. That's what slows your race down the most. You want to keep your brackets going. You want to keep your ramps full. Anytime you have gaps in the ramps, it delays your race it makes it take longer to get completed. So there's still some advantages to understanding how charts work, understanding how to release things. And even though technically, these things are numbered, 1, 2, 3, 4, they expect you to do 5 and 6 next. Then they expect you to go back to the winner's side for 7 and 8. Those numbers are a guideline. They're there to try to help keep your charts. I can tell you by my own experience, they're not always the most efficient way to run a chart. I have tweaked my release schedules differently depending on the day and whether I'm really tight on time or not. And I basically look at my charts and I say, okay, the loser of 1 is going here. The loser of 2 is going here. Okay, that makes sense. Let's run 1 and 2 together. I've got my pair over here, all set to be able to race. If you look at a 12-card chart, those numbers may look a little different on how they go across. If I pull up my 12-card chart and shrink this down a little bit here so that we can see more of it. Okay, loser 1, loser of 8 go together. Loser 2 and loser 7 go together. Okay, well, these 2 heats down here. So until these guys race, I can't pair up my 1 and 8. So maybe I want to release 1 and 4 first. So that way I also got the loser of 1 and 8 are able to race quicker, because once these guys run, then that heat's available and that heat's available. Okay. Those are things that you can look at when you're really trying to make the most efficient use of your time. There's some people that I know will run the race. Nope, got to wait till this entire bracket's all full before I release them. That's not always the most efficient way to run it. You want to keep your brackets even, but you also want to keep your ramps full and keep the race moving along. So you do have to be careful. Just some people will just say, oh, if you're paired up, go ahead and race. That doesn't always make the most efficient race. So
the thing that he's going to want to do, Mark, is
yep.
The great thing with this app is that usually when you're running a race with just a chart without this app, the only people that has any idea of what's going on at the race is whoever has the chart in front of them. This app will allow you to have multiple people, everybody in your race can have access to the chart. So there's several of us at my races in Chicago that are watching that chart. And when I see that one bracket is falling behind and another bracket is getting way ahead, then I tell those cars that are way behind, cut in front of the ones that are way far ahead so we can get the race to bring together. So you're going to want to have everybody in your group that's running your race to know how to look at this app and stay on top of running it. You will no longer have to be running back and forth to the chart to know what's going on. You don't have to have anybody constantly yelling out, this is who is racing who. You tell everybody, pay attention to your phone. At my races, we rarely ever have to announce that somebody needs to get in line. Everybody knows to pay attention to their phone. The first time in the morning is when we're doing most of our announcing once everybody gets paired up, everybody just stays with it. You just have some of your people constantly watching that chart.
Yep. Good point, Stan. What I did while you were speaking is I went ahead and entered phase A. Now that I've got a chart here, you'll notice that my phase will list actually the race. That's my test 12-card chart and heat 1. And if I go to that chart, basically you'll see that it's now yellow. Whenever you see a cell that's yellow, that tells you that they've run their first phase and they're pending for their second phase. So this is another way when you on your charts, if I still see a green here, it's like, why haven't they raced yet? If they're behind, it's especially if you're on to round 2 and you still got someone from round 1 that hasn't raced yet. Where are they? Did they not go to the ramps? You know, what's happening with them? Use these color codes to know exactly where they are. If they're green, they still have both phases to run. If they're yellow, it means they already ran down one phase. They're most likely on the way back up to the top of the hill to race their second one. Okay. If I go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and finish that particular heat. So 101 and 100. I'm going to go back here, just enter 101 and 100. I've got them in the starting blocks. I'm going to put a time on them. You can see now in my races tab, I've got your overall time. On my charts, it now shows them in a gray status. Gray status indicates that that phase or that heat has been fully completed. It advanced the winner to 5, matched up with 108, automatically generated the pending for you now that it had a pair of drivers. So that pending is out there ready to race. Car 101 went over to our consolation bracket and waiting for the loser of 8 before it can pair up and generate a pending for you. Okay. The nice part about this is it's going to generate all those pendings for you automatically. If for some reason you ever get to the ramp and you got a pair and they know they're paired up in the chart, for some reason the starting block doesn't recognize them, first thing to check is what do they look like in this chart? You know, are they both paired up and they're white and they're clear still? That means they didn't get loaded for some reason. Then you just click into the cell, both driver numbers are there, hit update. It'll attempt to load the pending. If it can't for some reason, it'll give you an error message indicating why it can't. Maybe one of the drivers is still in another pending race somewhere else. Maybe they had a DQ situation, but someone never finished the DQ on the other race, or they had restarted it basically. Let's say they had a rerun. It advanced them at one point, put them in a cell, they rerun, and they didn't clear out that pending that was created.
So Mark,
Yes.
describe what happens, how you process a DQ. That'd be a good example for us to, so the exceptions are always what get us in trouble at these.
Exception, yes. Typically what I do with the DQ, there's some options here when you're going to update a chart where there's a racer, there's a bye, there's a forfeit. A forfeit is not a DQ. Okay, if a DQ, you're just DQing them from that heat. You basically just need to make them lose from that heat. If you use the forfeit acts as this driver is forfeiting from the race. And according to all American rules, if you forfeit from a heat, you are done with the entire race. You are not allowed to continue on to the next one. So if you record it as a forfeit, it will clear them completely all the way to the end of the charts. And that way, as other drivers advance, it'll pair up and move them along into the next bracket if they happen to go up against someone forfeited.
So an example of where you might use a forfeit if somebody has to leave early, for example.
Exactly. Yes. If they have to leave early, or let's say they had a bad accident, their car's destroyed, they can't race anymore, you have to forfeit them out of the race. That's where you would use a forfeit. That's the only time.
When we had to fly home the one day early, we had to forfeit Chase out and then put him in his placement for the day.
Exactly. So let's say I want to just DQ someone. Let's say I go in here and I got 40 and 12, for instance. I'm going to go into my phases. I'm going to add 40 and 12. And let's say they went ahead and they ran first phase. This driver won by 100. And now I'm going to add them back in for their second phase. And let's say they went down the track for their second phase and one of the drivers crossed the line and is being DQ'd. And The timer system may end up, if they still pass the finish line and they still finish the race and it recorded a time. So let's say maybe it recorded the fact that this one won the race by 0.05. So now they've got a completed race. Okay. Well, wait a second though, that person got DQ'd. Okay. How do we fix that? So if we look at it on our chart side of things, wrong chart, this chart, it ended up moving Aspen ahead. Let's say Aspen was the one that should have been DQ'd. Okay. There's a couple things I have to deal with then. First of all, it created a pending for Carly and Aspen. I don't want that pending there anymore. So I need to get rid of the pending for 37 and 40. Okay, so first thing I'll do is I'll go to my pending tab. I'll find my 3740. It happens to be right on the top, but if I don't know that, if it's not right on the top, I can type in one of the car numbers and boom, I know which one. I found it right away, really easily. I can verify the heat number is correct, and I can say delete this pending phase. Okay, pending phase is gone. Then I go back to my chart. You can see that turned white at this point. Now I'm going to basically say Aspen got DQ'd out of this race. So if I go back into this one, I need to get rid of one of these phases in order for me to DQ that person. What I would typically do is I would go out into the race history. Okay, my race tab isn't, oh, there we go. Here's the Aspen Roll one. I'm going to go into the history on it. And my B phase, I want to actually delete. So let's go into actually delete from here. I'm going to delete the B phase. Okay. Now at this point, I'm back. If I look at my charts, wrong chart. They're back to yellow, indicates that they have a phase recorded and they have a B phase pending. Okay. At this point, I could go ahead and put them into the starting chart blocks as 12 and 40.
Good luck, Jim.
And from here, I can actually use my timer feature to basically say that Aspen's the one that's losing this race and being DQ'd. So therefore, I'm going to guarantee that this one is the winner by adding some number that was an artificial number. And if I go into my charts now, Ronan moved ahead, Aspen moved over into the consolation bracket.
So why didn't you use the DQ pull down option?
The DQ pull down option, there is no DQ pull down option.
Was there on the, I remember clicking, right clicking that item there, and then you get the option.
This one only has buy and forfeit. Is DQ in your new one, Chris? I didn't think so.
No, there's no DQ. Part of the complexity with DQ is Mark had to delete that pending, but when the race advances, you don't know that it's only advanced one level, because if there's buys or forfeits in play, it might have gone a couple levels or potentially even more. And so the DQ, you kind of have to look at that and know what you're going to do based on the situation and why it's being DQ'd. It's not something that relatively lends itself to being automated.
Now, the other option that you technically could do, but I like having the history there so that you can see in the faces that, you purposely changed the race results. Because as we saw in the phases area, it's going to show If I go to the race history now and look at the history for this one, every single thing from the pending A to B went back to the A, and then our final B one where we put in the false time to force the change of the winner. Okay. The benefit of doing it that way is you've got a transparent history of the fact that this was altered that way. In theory, the other way that you could do it is, let's say I want to make Aspen the winner here again and not Ronan. I could go out here and delete the pending for 07. This one. Delete. Pending's gone. Go back to my 8-card chart. And let's say I want Aspen to be the winner of this one. Technically, I could go into here, restage Aspen there. I have to go over here, put Ronan in here, and then it moved Ronan ahead automatically there. Technically, I could do that, but there's absolutely no recollection of that being done and why it happened. And if people would go and look at the phase history and they see, well, based on the phase history here, according to this, Ronan won. How come the chart is not showing Ronan as winning? That's why I like going the other route and recording it so that there's a history showing that we did alter this event versus it thinking, well, something's wrong with your charts. It's not working right. Okay, so definitely a quick and dirty way of doing it. Not what I'd recommend doing from the standpoint of someone questions it, you have nothing to back it up. Versus the other way, we have reason to back it up. I typically try to use a consistent time so that I know that this was a manually entered time to force a race to go one way or the other.
Okay, so is it usually the director that's making these alterations to the brackets?
There is usually a set of people that are defined as having the rights to make these type of changes. For instance, like we have starters that basically their responsibility is just starters. They have the ability to add a phase in, they can delete out of their starting gates. They don't have the authority to go in and adjust a race result. So we usually have a different set of people that have the authority and usually have more than one. Like at NDR events, myself, Chris can make those adjustments. We keep it as a fairly limited set, but it's got to be where you know the people are going to be available. So you're not holding up the race. So you can get the race fixed and get them back working. When you are making adjustments right now, at least with the current system, and you're doing it through the starting blocks, you do have to hold the race at that point because you basically need to use that add phase to put in that fake time. So you don't want any cars going down the hill while you're doing that activity. So you would basically hold the race at the top, don't enter starting blocks, quickly put the numbers in, do the manual time entries, and then you're all set to go. And then you can tell them, go ahead and, continue with the next starting block.
So I'm the race director in Chicago, and Chris is always at our races. So there used to be a time when he would handle any of those concerns, but as the race director, in my opinion, you really need to find somebody else that can handle that, just because a race director, from my perspective, has a lot of stuff to do during the day, that's what it is in my case. So Leslie Butler, who is our treasurer, she's the one that handles that, it seems like to me, more and more. And I gladly trust her and allow her and let her and want her to assume that responsibility, just because her job used to be to fill out the charts. So we no longer have a person who sits at the table and manually entering times in the charts. We haven't done that in a couple of years. So Leslie's time is now better spent making any changes on that app, like Mark was just suggesting.
Yeah. So typically you want to have a couple people available, just so that way if someone's not available, You got someone that can go in
Yeah.
and fix it, and you want people that are going to feel comfortable doing it.
Sure. So
You don't want someone who's going to just go in there and it's like, I don't know what I'm doing here, and make a mistake.
that's for sure.
I'd also suggest that when you're getting your feet wet with the app, that you keep the manual charts. I wouldn't jettison the manual charts until you're comfortable working with the app.
So
Yeah,
are
that's
Very good point.
most people using phones or computers or to do this stuff or what?
We're
I
typically
think
running with
Leslie
a
and
phone.
Mark. Yeah, Leslie and
And the-
Mark do all their early morning stuff on their laptop, and then from there, everybody's using their phone. You need to get a QR code, which we have, and we have that set up at our race. And we tell people at the drivers meeting, this is the QR code, scan it, get on the race, stay on it all day, and pay attention to what's going on. And you can even send that to people that are at home. They can keep track of what's going on with the race.
Yeah, but during the race, to me, most of the activities that you need to do with adjusting a race or removing a pending and all that, very easily done from a phone.
And very seldom.
Yeah, and the charts and all that, you can see, well, these are big charts. On the phone, you can zoom in, zoom out, to wherever you need, slide it around to whatever pieces you want. Typically the biggest thing is that when I go between a chart and the pending or chart and the phases, it's a matter of zoom in, zoom out, to get to the appropriate size, like the menu bar. You can see up here, my menu is up in the top right-hand corner. Okay, well, if you're on a phone and you zoomed in on the chart, the menu ends up being way over here, off screen. So sometimes I have to resize in order to get back to where the menu is. But I use my phone all the time. One is it's always available, it's always on me, easily set in my pocket. I just pull it out whenever needed. I don't have to go over to where a computer's sitting. At the indoor races in Chicago, Leslie's actually got a laptop running, so there's a laptop there that she can use if needed. She's also using a multi console display where she's actually got displayed all the charts from each of the different divisions, so that anybody who doesn't have their phone on them can actually come up and look at each chart, which is pretty cool. But when you're outdoors and you're dealing with weather, not as easily to do that. They typically use that only in the indoors. But if you have a nice protected area, it's kind of neat to have a laptop with multiple screens showing all the different races available to people. Okay, any other questions? Let's go back to my slides here and see if I've missed anything. So I think I kind of went ahead on my slides. We talked about that, just making sure that you're still managing your race appropriately. You're not getting your charts out of sync. Talked about running the charts efficiently. Oops. Manage your delays. Top of the hill management is something that is people always question how it should be done. Some people believe that phase B should always be given priority. I'm not a believer of that. I'm a believer that you always alternate A's and B's. The A's are up there for a reason. They're in there to keep your charts balanced. If you don't allow the A's to race, then you could be causing your charts to get out of balance and will cause you issues in efficiency along the way. So I typically, at the top of the hill, always run A and B alternates whenever they're both up there, because they both need to get done. And people have stated, well, it's done so that the two times are close together for those races. In NDR, we have a rule: you have to have those races within 20 minutes of each other for A and a B phase. Even using the alternate approach, I have never had a pair of drivers exceed that 20-minute time frame. And I run full hills all the time up there. So the alternate approach does work. I proved it with the statistics, as we showed earlier with those timestamps. I dumped all that data and I compared A to B, what the gaps were. And I had no problem at all doing the alternate approach.
Mark, you noted it
Yes.
clear, and I'm gonna reiterate that you're metering your A's in. You're just not letting all the A's run up to the top of the hill to do that.
Right. I am controlling the release of my fields for when I have the large races where I only send so many people up at a time and I keep my charts balanced, but I'm also making sure my top of the hill is always full. I don't wait for entire brackets to fill up. I basically am using my wheel tent and my scaling tent to control when I can send more people up and keep the top of the hill full. The charts tab, we were on that already. Just to kind of go over some of the features. Clicking on the chart within the list will display the chart. The dice button is used for auto population, and the pencil will let you rename the chart if you need to rename it, or you can also have a hide feature. So let's say you created a chart by accident. It was the wrong size. You needed a 12 car, you created a 8 car. You can actually go into the chart option and click on this little pencil here. And there's a hidden option. You can click on that little hidden button and hit update. And it should eliminate that chart from the screen. Okay. If you need to get it back, you can do view hidden charts and go back into it and uncheck the button and it will come back. So typically it's a great feature where if you accidentally built a chart the wrong way, wrong size, you can get rid of it so it doesn't show up and not confusing anybody. Okay. For the chart page, we talked about this already. If it's clear, no color in it, that means there's no pending race for it yet. If it's green, that means you got a pending started for phase A. If it's yellow, that means phase A is completed and it's all set for phase B. And if it's gray, it's all the heat is completed. Any driver cell for heat can be clicked on to drill into that heat details. And as I showed, you can change the drivers. If for some reason you have a pair in there and all of a sudden you find out, nope, they're not going to make it, they're not going to be able to race. You know, one option you do have is you can switch a driver to a buy. So I have done that occasionally where on my first round, typically your buys are supposed to be in certain spots. But let's say I have a driver that was supposed to race and all of a sudden last minute, they canceled out on me and they didn't show up. You know, do you redo your charts? Or do you just consider this as a random? And I'm going to switch this heat to a buy for that driver and let the chart continue from there. That option is available to you. So I have seen that option used already. From the driver cell, you can change racers to buy the forfeit. As a reminder, the forfeit cannot be undone. It pushes the driver all the way through the complete chart. You can view the heat details with the 3-dot menu for history, bracket, and delete. Chart creation, we kind of went through this already. You can go to the chart tab, select your chart type, and then those day, time, and division can be used to help generate unique names. Or you can type in your own name. And as Stan mentioned, for All American, it can be handy to have those things included in the name so that you can actually submit the chart to the All American. Tips and tricks: charts can be done manually, populated, or randomly. I highly recommend random. To manually populate, you select the chart, you click on each of the red cells, the red heats, and you can fill in the numbers. You got to make sure you put them in the right cell. If you're dealing with the ones where you're adding in a buy run, make sure those are good and put in the right cells. Once the heat is populated with 2 drivers, it'll turn green, and it means that there's a pending race out there. If you do need to make corrections, you do need to remove the pendings before you make the adjustment, or at least after you make the adjustment, you have to make sure you go and remove those. If you do not remove them, it will prevent those drivers from getting their proper pendings when the time is right. If a heat had a bye included, the heat will stay colorless. Since there is no race to be run, the driver will automatically advance to the next round, and the bye will advance to the loser's bracket and carry through properly. Once all heats are populated, you validate your race and make sure all your registered drivers are entered. Make sure all your buys are in the appropriate positions, and you're set to race. The auto population will put the buys in the right spots. If you are manually entering things, you're responsible to put the buy where it belongs. It won't tell you that you got it in the right spot or not. Random creation process I have documented here. We went through that. So you basically go through, you select your drivers. Once you got the drivers, the proper count selected, you go ahead and pick select the 10 driver button in this case. And then it'll show you a screen with the list of your drivers. And go ahead and hit the fill chart button, and it'll automatically fill your chart for you. As we talked about, the only ASPD rule is to make sure you give them the ability to witness chart creation so that they know that you're not fudging drivers to go against each other or not go against each other. So I see no issues with the randomization feature. I highly recommend it.
Except that ASPD doesn't allow it.
What's that?
Thank God.
So I highly recommend the auto population. Chart creation can typically be done from any device, depending on the method chosen. If you're trying to show other people, if people are really interested in seeing it, a laptop screen works better so they can see the whole thing being built. Or if you have an extra monitor attached to it, facing them makes it even easier. But it can be done easily from a phone as well. I've done that as well. Race management, your starting blocks. I typically always use a phone for this device. You just hit the plus button, and then you type in 2 sets of car numbers, and you're all set to go. It'll give you messages if you got them in the wrong lane. It'll give you messages if it can't find a pending race. And then you got to go into troubleshooting mode. What can be wrong? Fair driver in the wrong lanes. That can be confirmed by looking at the chart and adjusting if using the low car in lane 1 option. At this time, you must have the cars moved to the correct lanes. There is no option to change the race system to accept them in the wrong lanes. The pending race is not found. You basically have to use your charts, determine what's going on. Are they colorless? That means the pending didn't get created. You can try to go ahead and create the pending by just updating that cell. And typically, when you try that update, if there is a problem, it will tell you where the problem is. Say driver such and such is in a pending race. Go to your pendings, search for those driver numbers, and then be able to delete the incorrect ones out there. And then you should be able to go back to your chart, re-update that heat, and it'll go ahead and add the correct pending out there. Typically, those type of issues come into play when you're dealing with reruns and you let a driver advance, you didn't clean up the pendings from when they had advanced prior to the rerun. So you got to make sure you do all your cleanup whenever you have a rerun situation, so that it doesn't cause you problems on the road. The other issue that can cause you problems is, let's say a driver's pair up because they know that they're supposed to race according to the charts, but the prior race was a forfeiture and they never recorded the forfeiture. The prior race was a DQ and they didn't record the DQ. So it hadn't paired up the drivers yet to actually make a pending race. In those cases, fix up your chart, move it along, and it should generate the pending for you, and you'll be able to race. Just some more information, check the charts. As we talked about, yellow and green
give you an indication of where they're at. And if you're trying to remove something or complete something, it'll give you the idea what you need to do, whether it's one phase or two phases that need to be cleaned up. Options to complete a prior heat. You can complete a prior heat by adding it to the phases, putting it into starting blocks, and then using the timer feature, put in a manual time. If you need to put in two heat or two phases, you got to put them in starting block twice. Just make sure you set the winning car correctly as the cars flip between lanes. If you're forfeiting, you can go to the chart, click on the driver pair for that heat, change that drop down from racer to forfeit, and then it will go through and it will forfeit that person all the way through. Go to the pending and search for drivers and delete any pending race for that heat associated with the original pair. And as a reminder, forfeit will process the driver through the entire race, and it is not reversible. Was an additional race created where a driver got a pending race and settings are now not set to allow multiple pendings? You basically just need to go and delete those pendings that are inaccurate and allow it to go back in and reset the one that is colorless right now. So typically, it's always a matter of using your chart display and using your pending display to be able to match things back up if they get out of sync. The race itself will normally run just fine by itself. It's when you start manipulating it that if you don't clean things up correctly, that's where it can cause you problems down the road in the race. So always watch when you're doing cleanup work because of a rerun or because of a DQ, that you check where everything's slid and make sure it's all lined up properly and that all the pendings are cleaned up properly if it created some. Just a little overview. Chart is a great spot to start your statuses. Remember those color codes. Invalid or discarded pending races must be deleted from the pending list. And if pending conflicts exist, new pair may stay in no pending status. Manual completion of a heat can be done by adding phases into the starting blocks and using a timer option. Manually enter a time for one or both phases. Just to make sure the proper driver advances. And a forfeiture can be added by changing the driver via the chart heat detail page for the racer to forfeit. If you need to do a rerun, you go to the chart, include the heat, select the driver for the heat. Pages will show the current status, A time only, or A being overall. If heat is completed, you need to delete the pending for any heat with the driver's advance to both the winning and the consolation side bracket. Use the delete pending instructions from earlier to do that. Go to the heat, and then to be rerun and use the delete button option from the 3-dot menu. For the heat details, to use the delete button. If only a phase is completed, go to the heat and be rerun and use the delete option. You just delete that one phase, and then you can continue on with the current pending.
So, Mark, again, in the case of a tie, do you then delete?
The tie will automatically reset up that particular heat. Correct,
Okay.
Chris?
Correct.
Yeah. So what will happen is when you get a tie in the races, it will show that it's a tie. But on the chart, it will reset itself and it will still record it all in the same heat. So if you look at the history, you will see that the fact there was a pending, an A, a B, and then now back to a pending. And then it will go back onto an A phase and a B phase showing up. It all stays with that heat history. So you do not have to do anything for ties. And it will automatically do the extra round at the end for the winner of the winners. If the consolation bracket beats the winner of the winners, it'll automatically add the extras pair. And if those happen to get a dead heat, it'll reset them and allow them to rerun it.
Okay.
No timing situations. These are very rare. They can happen depending on your timing system. In our case with Chris's timer, typically there are some settings in there that control things on how long it takes a car to cross the finish line, minimum and maximum times, how many perforations are available. Those type of things may need to be tweaked for your particular track. So we have had cases where all of a sudden, if we're only expecting one perforation for the cables, but on a stock car, the radius rods happen to have a big enough opening that it allowed the timer to get a perforation and say no longer trip. We have settings in the timer area that we can go in and tweak those things. His timing system is always capturing the times no matter what. So let's say someone didn't add the drivers to the starting block before they released them. The timer still captured their time. So you could technically add the starting block and then go into the raw timer list, find that time, and apply it to that starting block. So you don't have to rerun just because it didn't show up at the end of the race. If the timer's still out there, if the time was captured, you still have the options in his system to apply that to that race.
And to be clear, that feature won't apply to the way Jim's timer's hooked up to the system.
Okay. Because he's doing the feed in from the magic timer.
He's got his own homegrown timer, and he's gonna basically it runs the wrapper that makes it key in a manual time. So if his
Gotcha.
timer recorded the time, he could go manually type that time in, but he'd have to know what the time is from his timer. It's not something that our system would help with.
Gotcha. Okay, good point. So the information in here about the raw timer is really if you're using Chris's timing system itself, that is designed to auto reset. It's designed to auto capture. It's designed to deal with people walking through the timer. It always captures every single break of that timer, and you can grab any particular time and apply it to a race. So we'll skip by most of that stuff that's about because this won't apply to you. But we do have all those different settings to control that within his system. Forfeitures, as noted in the earlier scenarios, system does support recording a forfeiture. All forfeitures are for remainder of the race, and they are final. Most activities during the actual race can be handled easily through phones. They're easily carried on multiple personnel trained in resolving issues. Having a tablet, or a laptop available for a complicated issue can be beneficial, but typically I only have my phone on me. I don't typically bring my laptop. We'll use my laptop at the announcer table so that it's easy for him to see the race finishes and the driver info. So it's at the track if I need it. But typically I'm using my phone all the time. So I'm not usually at the timer table. I'm all over the track usually. So phones to me work really well for all the troubleshooting, all the monitoring of the race to see where the charts are at, keeping track of the balances of the charts. I can do that from anywhere, wherever I am during the race day. And that's it for my slides. Any other questions you have? I can bring the system back up here. If there's anything we didn't cover or any questions you have, I can try to address those.
How about you, Lo? Do you have anything to say?
Did you ask me, Jim?
Yeah.
My initial reaction is whoever's going to be updating the timing sheets is going to need a lot of practice between now and June 1st or 2nd.
Yep.
There's a lot of things you can do, and a lot of buttons you have to push. So if
The nice
whether
thing
it's
is you can,
you or Blake,
the nice thing is
guys
you
are-
can set up a dummy race, a training race. At any point, you can use the timer mode to enter times. You could set up your timer to it and just, cross things through it. And you can check out the different features. I would definitely recommend that being new to the system, trying to get it there and work with the practice race ahead of time.
Yeah. So my goal is in about 2 weeks to get our timing and bracket team together one more time with my timer in operation here, so we can work through that part of it as well, and actually do a short, small, bracket race from beginning to end to make sure we can understand what's going on, and include a few things like DQs and that sort of thing, so we can get comfortable with how to resolve those issues.
Yep, that'd be great.
How about Oliver? Do you
Oh.
got anything?
I don't have anything really.
Okay. Bob, how about you?
I have nothing. I think it's great.
Okay. Who else do I got online here? Oh yeah, Blake.
Yeah, nothing right now, just kind of absorbing it all. It looks good though.
Yeah, it's very well put together. Mark, thanks for doing this for us. It's wonderful.
One of the things I want to point out, Jim, is you're having the practice I've had with the app. I will of course be on hand as well. And then worst case scenario, I have Leslie's contact info. I have information for Ogallala. We can get a hold of somebody if we unfortunately end up in a situation that we don't understand.
Yeah, well, I think we'll be.
So Brandy, caveat I would put on that is that Ogallala and like Des Moines don't have access to your system. You'd have to give them access to update. Mark has super power privileges and I have super power privileges. So either one of us can do updates to any org, but everybody else would need to be permissioned in to get the ability to do times or add races or manipulate your charts.
I'm thinking more of if I need to call somebody and ask how something's done, we have their contact info. If you're not on the app or Mark isn't on the app as quickly.
I think that's great. I just wanted to make sure that you understood that they're in read-only mode.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we need to get comfortable with this ourselves anyway. And we'll do that, I think, in our little training session that we'll be running the next couple of weeks. So
sorry,
Yeah,
Jim, who
and
did
I
you
have
say?
no problem either. If you do need to try to contact me if I'm available, I'd be glad to try to help out. So
okay, great.
Jim, who did you say the super users were? You and who else?
Well, we have to determine that, don't we? I'm not sure who it's going to be.
Oh, I thought you had a name.
No, not at this point.
Okay.
You guys can delegate for your organization anybody that you want.
Yep.
And as many as you want. And that's kind of what Mark was talking about earlier, is that you typically want to limit that so that you don't get too many cooks in the kitchen.
Sure. So we couldn't find the user setup thing on the web page that I brought up. Brandy and I were trying to do that before this meeting took off.
Yeah, Brandy shot herself in the foot a couple of times today. I thought that was
Yeah.
pretty cute.
I
I
know.
love you, Chris. You love me so much, right? I
Mark,
know
can
I'm
you-
your favorite out of towner coming to Chicago.
Mark, can you bring that page up and show them what we're looking at there?
which page are we talking about here, Chris? The org users?
Org users, yeah.
Okay, that's where you find it. We didn't see the org user in my list of options.
That's probably because you're not set up as a power user. I know Brandy is. I don't remember what kind of user you are. I thought you were a power user, but somehow that tells me you're not.
I made sure that he was a power user.
So yeah, so the Chris's system basically has different options that are defined by, different power users, registration desk, starter, starter limited, and video. The only thing that should be video is the ID that's logged in taking the video. The starter is basically given to the person who's doing the data entry for the races. And the registration basically gives you the capability to set up the charts for the race. The power user is the one that has the full abilities to correct phases and things like that.
Okay.
You need to have power to be able to do timer. Starter limited only can add races to the blocks. It can't delete races from the blocks. So we have a starter that sometimes gets confused, and I don't want him to accidentally delete a race from the blocks.
Okay, so yeah, I just brought up my my interface and I'm not seeing the org user thing in there. So I'd appreciate if we could get that set up so then in position to do the training in about 2 weeks.
Yeah, if Brandy has it, you should be able to go in there and add power user to you.
Brandy, the one thing I will note, Brandy, is that you don't need to select multiple of those. If you're power, that's all you need. You don't need registration and starter. And it looks like you select multiple options.
That makes sense.
That might be part of your problem. So if somebody's power, just leave them at power. Don't put anything else in.
Yep, and that's where I had Jim should have power on his end, because I had selected that when we set him up.
And that's not intuitive. I recognize that now that we're walking through that. And the same is true registration. You don't really need registration and starter. Registration can do starting blocks. So they kind of are, I think in the order they're in that drop down, that's the kind of hierarchy. So power is on top, registration's next, starter's third, starter limited is fourth, and video is last.
Yeah.
Video is kind of in its own category, but the other four are all have a clearly defined delineation of superset, subset.
Okay.
Sounds good.
So I guess
Any other features that we haven't covered that you need to know about?
I don't have anything. How about on your side? You have a number of people that haven't had a chance to get their word in.
I think it's just our organization left on here, Jim.
Yeah, it looks like Stan dropped off.
Okay.
Stan texted me and said he had to drop.
Okay, good enough. All right. Well, I really appreciate what you've done for us here.
Thank you.
Chris,
Thank
you have
you.
a great system here. I really appreciate putting this thing together. And Mark,
So I hope it works well for you.
big help in my effort to get the triggering system interfaced with your brackets. So that seems to be working pretty well at this point.
Awesome.
I appreciate you all.
Process of, I'm deploying some new changes, Jim, and so we'll probably have to make a couple of tweaks to the way that is integrated. I don't expect it to be earth shattering now that you've got the connectivity set up.
Okay, so you're saying I might have to change something to my code in order to make it work with your brackets here coming up?
Yeah, I suspect that you'll need to update your Electron app.
Oh, okay. Okay. At this point or in the future?
I'm not ready to do that yet.
Okay. Just give me a Slack response and
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to give you a heads up that's coming down the road.
Okay. Appreciate that. Okay, I'm done unless
Hey, my plus is back.
give Mark's voice a little bit of a rest. We kind of wore him out a bit, I think.
Yeah, I kind of caught a cold this past week. So,
Doesn't help.
no, it didn't help at all. So trying to keep it lubricated. But as you can see, just some of the things that are coming in the newer version. We added on the driver the ability to have car sponsors, car notes, as just a way to put in some additional information. And I believe if we're on our phases, I think there's an option through, is it on the starting blocks, Chris, that it will display that information?
Plus buttons there, not Mark.
Yep. I just want to get a pairing here. 12 and 28.
So that the drop down on top is new.
This one?
No,
Oh,
the
which drop down?
delete the Ronan Levi race and do another plus. At the top where it says race.
Oh, this one. Yes, that's right. The new feature on this one is typically you're always adding a race. Now you have the ability, you can actually add it in as a trial run, a fun run, or a hot run.
That'll be nice at Chicago Indoor.
And it's a way to basically capture it without, and I think do these still require the pending to be defined, Chris, or not?
No, race is the only one that needs a pending.
Okay, race is the only one that needs a pending. If I do it as a trial run, I can type any numbers I want here.
And I think you only need one lane, Mark. You don't need two lanes actually, or two cars.
And it shows up as yellow instead of the traditional green and flags as a trial run. Yes, it will also let you do one car.
And if you go to the timer page on that, and this might work a little bit goofy, Jim, with your system, because the Electron app's going to want to try to put a time in. So I hadn't thought about that, but the trial run and your integration probably isn't going to work. But you're not going to get a time on those anyway, because your times are probably need two lanes. You need a differential, right?
Right.
Yeah, so it wouldn't spit anything out for anything. So somebody'd have to manually go in and complete this phase to get rid of it. So if you just punch the complete phase button, Mark,
so my timing system can actually go elapsed times. And if the two timing fields were allow both of them to have numbers rather than just one of them being 0, then I could transfer elapsed times to your system as well, I would think.
Yeah, I've got my plate pretty full. I don't think I have room to take on development for that integration right now.
Okay, so that's really not an option at this point.
Yeah, not right now.
Okay.
Anything else from the new version, Chris, that you want me to show them or not?
You did the drivers. I think that's it. Most of the stuff I've been working on is like it's got the elapsed page. You can, yeah, that. And
This is just sample data, but this is kind of what he's working on, trying to produce.
And if you go, I might have a timer hooked up to this. Go to elapsed times or timer config elapsed. Yeah, right there. And do an add. Scroll down a little bit and see if you got anything green. You do. So go ahead and add that Devo 1 timer. So hit the radio button for Devo 1 and scroll down to the bottom and hit update.
Okay.
And now if you punch the health button, so that the satellite icon means that you've got a satellite signal lock. And the health button has all kinds of features about diagnostics on the timer. That's all new.
That works with your timers, not necessarily his.
Right. Yeah, that it is all raw data coming off my timer.
Okay.
And that timer is I just epoxied that 2 days ago, Mark, and it turned out good.
Awesome.
I can't wait to use it in Chicago.
Hopefully we'll get more of them out there and you won't need to just go to Chicago.
I mean, in due time.
Come out to South Charleston for the NDR.
It doesn't work with our schedule this year, unfortunately.
Okay.
We've been thinking about putting NDR on the schedule, but Chicago works out for me because that's where my parents are. So the hotel and all of that other stuff,
Yep.
it's not quite a budget factor when we head up that way. Whereas most everywhere else, it is a budget factor.
Understood.
Okay, I
Now,
think
if you come out our way for NDR, Ogallala sounds great. I can do that one.
Oglala has shown interest in wanting to host it, so we typically try to at least have it 2 years in one location, so that we can always improve the second year in case we have any bumps the first year. So instead of having to restart from the beginning every year. So there's a chance Oglala might have it in the future. We'll see. I've seen their track. I've never raced it. We used to have a condo in Vail, Colorado. And so one of the times we went by Oglala, we said, let's go find the track. So we took a look at it, but I never got a chance to race it with my
We
kids.
will be there on Sunday. Chase, it's his favorite, I think, right now. I don't know. It is a very fast track, though.
yeah,
Yeah.
I get going 30 miles an hour on that track.
I think the fastest one my kids raced was Owensboro.
How fast?
That was a 30, 35 mile an hour hill too.
Hmm.
With a very
Well,
short run out.
That's
Kind of
what I've
scary
heard.
from that perspective.
That's what I've
Mark
heard.
asked if there's anything new. There is one other thing that you kind of saw that we glossed over, and that was that log in with Google button. So if you go over to log out, and then click on login. So right now it's got your login cached, but
Oh, I
when
was gonna
you
say,
yeah, Amazon does that. I haven't figured out how to flush that yet.
okay.
But there it is. So the continue with Google. Right now I'm in some kind of sandbox mode with Google. I need to get that verified. And once Google says okay, you'll be able to push that and you won't have to do a user and password.
Okay.
That'll be nice.
But that is dev mode only right now. That's how I spent the last couple of days, is trying to get that working.
Is that then linked by the email associated with that Google account?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you don't have a Google email, it wouldn't work. Ideally, I'll get a Google and an Apple button both on there, but I kind of wanted to get the Google feature working.
Yep.
One step at a time.
I just know I've got to make sure I'm on the right Google account.
Yeah.
I got multiple Google accounts.
No,
They come in
what I was
handy,
working
very
on-
handy for work.
I have
What I was working on
multiple
about
on
an
my
hour
end.
ago was trying to get the log out button working, and the log out button still doesn't completely get you out, it looked like.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got 3 Google accounts that I use on my work computer. I use my NDR Google account, my personal Google account, and my corporate Google account.
So what
I
I've been doing
have-
to kind of hack that and test is open an incognito window in
Yep.
the browser, and it'll force a new login.
Right.
Okay, guys, are you
Thank
done?
you very much, Mark and Chris.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. We're happy to have you on board.
All right. Well, Chris, I'll be talking to you later then.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good
Bye.
night.